Hey, this is David Lee Goodman. I've got Jackson Maddox here with me. We are realtors and also property investors. And today we are going to be looking into a specific neighborhood in Nashville. This is our neighborhood breakdown YouTube page. So we're just getting started with it. Last week we did Donaldson, and today we're actually going to be getting into Berry Hill. Some really interesting information. So we'll get right into it.
Yep, Berry Hill is one of my favorite parts in town, and it's one that I've spent maybe the most or second most amount of time in. So I was really excited to do this one. So Berry Hill is it's actually just under 1 square mile. It's 0.9 square miles, and it is one of Nashville's 6 satellite cities, which means it's incorporated as its own thing.
Right.
But it is still under the umbrella of the Nashville metro area.
Yeah, I've been always very curious about like what is Berry Hill, because they have their own police force. It seems like they have their own little town center and community center. It's like this landlocked little city within Nashville. So I've been really curious, like, what is that about? Did you look into why that is? Like, what's up with Berry Hill?
So in 1950, they had a vote, and I believe the vote was won 138 to 135 on incorporating. Actually, I learned this. You'd be surprised. There's actually only 6 full-time police officers, 1 full-time dispatch officer.
I'm surprised they have that many.
Yeah.
There's like 10 blocks in the city.
It's a pretty small little police department, and as far as what I can tell, it seems like Berry Hill kind of has jurisdiction over itself, and then if something is going on
Is it still Nashville?
It is still technically Nashville, but it's also its own thing.
It's also Berry Hill.
So it's kind of confusing, but I think the way it basically works is that if something goes beyond the scope of just Berry Hill, then the city can step in and kind of deal with that. So Berry Hill sort of deals with itself on its own scale, and then if anything happens that is larger scale than 0.9 square miles, then
Nashville
bring in the big guns. Yeah.
Well, I was actually looking from the Berry Hill website. They've got a little bit of information here that I thought was really interesting. It says Berry Hill is the smallest in both size and population of Metro's Nashville's 6 satellite cities. So it's the tiniest, which I'm not surprised about. Separately incorporated cities located wholly or partly inside of Metro Nashville. It goes on to say that Berry Hill is less than 1 square mile, like you said, and has a population of less than 600 residents as of 2010. But I know that in 2020 that has gone up. So let's see. It says, since then, Berry Hill, like most of Metro Nashville, has enjoyed a development boom with multifamily, townhome, and mixed-use developments adding approximately 1,200 residential units. Berry Hill has long been home to a thriving music industry, which we're going to get into, including about 40 recording studios and music publishers, which is an insanely a large amount of studios and publishers like in such a tiny spot, which is kind of why it's such a special place. It's primarily 1940s era cottages, which I think we'll talk a little bit about.
As far as the houses go, if you're driving throughout Berry Hill in the neighborhood areas, you're going to see those 40s, houses. And the interesting thing is that those houses, you don't know if you're looking at a house or a studio. I have people I know personally that live in those neighborhoods in regular houses, and then they'll say, hey, right there across the street, that's actually a studio, and it looks totally like a residential house.
So the 1940s, is that when Berry Hill came to be, or when did Berry Hill begin?
So that's really when those houses were first being built, post-World War II and into the 50s.
Why is it called Berry Hill?
Berry Hill, it comes from William Wells Berry, who actually owned that land. So he worked for a drug company, and he lived in Baltimore, Maryland, where he's from. And then when he was about 21, he moved down to Nashville, and he went on to found his own private drug company, and then basically did that and was a very successful business person.
He lived from 1813 to 1876, and so
Yep.
his descendants ended up selling this part of the farm to Nashville proper. Didn't get a lot of history other than he was a businessman, right?
Yeah.
And he was quite successful. But I mean, what's really interesting to me is that when he was doing all of this, like William Barry himself was in the middle of the Civil War,
Yes.
and he was accumulating a lot like during this like really crazy time, and came from Maryland, which is like the north, came
Mhm.
down to the south, bought a bunch of land, and was like, ended up owning a significant part of Nashville that's gone on to be, this kind of treasured part. So super powerful individual.
Yes.
And actually you can find his gravestone, interesting
Mhm.
fact, at the Mount Olivet cemetery.
Oh, interesting.
So
That's cool.
with a bunch of other, I guess, semi-famous dead people from Nashville.
Yeah.
So I did find that he is buried there now, and so that's an interesting tidbit.
Yeah.
So let's get into just the facts and figures real quick.
Sure.
What are the demographics of Berry Hill now?
So the current population sits at 1763, which is a slight decrease from 2087, which was in 2020. However, that's a huge jump from where it was in 2010. As far as income, household income is about 71,130, and you're looking at a median age of around 28.4 or 29.5 years for males and 27.5 years for females. So,
That's a lot, honestly, for Berry Hill, because Berry Hill is like quite expensive land, I think, these days. So I think there's probably that, to me, that 71,000, that's nothing to, I mean, that's a respectable income by no means. But I think most people who are getting into that neighborhood now, if they're buying a house there, they make probably more than that, if I had to guess. Because it's
for
super
sure.
expensive. Maybe it wasn't always that trendy of a place, but it definitely is now.
I mean, I can tell you just from personal experience, from working in studios around that area, there are houses that will go up, right down the street from some larger studios that are fully residential houses, and they're selling for 800,000 because
It's like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath.
And people want those houses because they're going to buy that and build a studio in there, or they're going to buy it and rent it out for people that want to be in proximity to those studios, and just kind of the general vibe of what's going on in Berry Hill.
That leads me to so why or how did this little pocket of the city, did you find out like why this little area has got so many music studios? Like, why is this a spot for that?
So in 1970, a man named Buzz Kaysen bought 2 houses in Berry Hill. Now he turned.
Who's Buzz Kaysen, would you say?
He was a producer, and he's notable. One of the most notable things that he did was the first client he ever did a record with in that studio was Jimmy Buffett, a young Jimmy Buffett.
Nice.
And it went on to be one of, I believe it was Jimmy Buffett's either first album. And now you're seeing, Music Row was Columbia Studio A, RCA, like you said. And then they went on to sort of phase those studios out a little bit and become offices. And so there's still studios on Music Row, but there's a lot of offices now.
They're a tourist destination.
For sure. And, a lot of the major labels have their offices over there. Buzz Kaysen bought 2 houses. One of those houses was later purchased by Blackbird Recording Studios, and they turned it into the Blackbird
Somewhere
Academy.
that you're familiar with, right?
I went to the Blackbird Academy. So
Gotcha.
That second house
That's cool.
was actually acquired by Blackbird right next door. But the creative,
and that's like a famous studio, right?
Blackbird's huge.
Like,
it's probably one of the top studios in the world.
Wow.
It's massive. And the Creative Workshop still runs. They're just down to 1 building, and they have a really cool little setup in there. It's a very cool vibe. It's very 70s. They kind of stayed true to the original vibe. Yeah. So basically from there, it just kind of caught on. And I think as the Music Row became more corporate and more saturated and values went up, people were looking for the next place to go.
So that's how all those music studios came to be. What else is in Berry Hill besides a few houses and music studios? Are there I know there's some great restaurants,
Yes.
coffee shops. Some of my favorites. I mean, Sam and Zoe's is like one of the best
Oh,
coffee
yeah.
shops
Sam
in
and Zoe's is
town.
great.
I actually knew the owner of that and who sold it to who's there now. But
Mhm.
they have like some of the best lattes.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
I know Vui's Kitchen.
Yep.
That's what turned me on to Vietnamese food to
Mhm.
begin with, and they're a
Pho.
Nashville staple.
Banh mi's.
What are your favorite? Since you spend so much time there,
Yeah.
what are your favorite restaurants and attractions to go to in that area?
I am a music guy, but I'm also a food guy, and that's definitely one of my favorite parts about this area is they just have so many good places in such a small radius. You'll just never run out of options. So just to quickly list off a few, we've got Baja Burrito over there.
Got to get our Mexican food.
Got to get our
in
Mexican
there.
food in there. You know, we're from Texas. You got Big
Excited.
Machine right there. They got their distillery and food as well, which is really good. And then if you go, so that's kind of your Bransford and Thompson
Right.
Convergence area. But then if you go a little bit down from there into the 8th Avenue area, you've got ML Rose, amazing burgers,
Right.
great beer selection. They have they just got voted one of the best beer selections in town. Cilantro, another Mexican place. They've got an East Nashville location as well. So people may have had from a different location or that one. And then my favorite breakfast place in Nashville is Maple Street Biscuit Company. I went there with my girlfriend, so we're going to throw in some footage of that. I just got to say, they have something called the Five and Dime. It is a biscuit, chicken, cheese, bacon,
Jesus.
sausage gravy, an egg cooked however you want, biscuit. You cannot eat it as a sandwich, but it's presented as a sandwich. It's totally just like you just got to get in there and cut it up. But it is one of my favorite breakfast items I think I've ever eaten.
Yeah.
They've also got these little cinnamon rolls that are really good.
Oh my god.
Yeah. So
well, and some
highly
other
recommend.
places you have to check out too. So the Yellow Porch is kind of more fine dining. That's been there for a really long time. We said Vui's Kitchen.
Yep.
Man, there's going to be others that we're just forgetting.
Oh,
The best vegan place in town. Or
Sunflower
if you're
Cafe.
into that sort of thing, is right in
on
that
Azalea
neck of the
Place.
word. Yep.
Oh, one more. This is another one that we actually went to this week. Mofongo Cafe. It is a Cuban restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
My
That's good.
girlfriend got the Cuban sandwich. I got the steak sandwich. I think she ordered better than me, but they were both delicious. It was so
I've
good.
been there as well. I was trying to look for restaurants, and that we had the Sunflower Cafe, and then we saw the Cuban place, and we're like,
I personally am not a vegetarian or vegan, so I saw the option that had meat, and it was right across the street, and we went
It's
there.
really good.
But we got 2 appetizers and 2 meals. Didn't even finish all of our food because it was so much, and it was like $30 for all of that.
That's
so
hard to come by.
it's hard to find these days, and it was amazing.
Well, that's awesome. I really thank you for digging into
Absolutely.
Berry Hill.
It was fun.
Man, if you guys have any questions about the area, or if you're interested in learning more about Nashville, we're doing these films or these videos on specific areas in Nashville. We're gonna move these over to a page called Living in Nashville. So please, anything that has to do with like living in Nashville, try to go over to that site. If you're already subscribed on my other page, you might want to go over to that, subscribe to it so that you can get more of this information in real time. We're going to stay closer to what's happening on as far as living in Nashville, not so much on the investor side, but like, what is it like to be here in Nashville? What are the pros and cons? What are the specific areas that you might be interested in learning more about? So that's what we're doing on that side of things. So be sure to check that out. And if you're looking to buy or sell in Nashville, like buy a home, live here, also hit us up as well. You can message us. You can message us in the comments or shoot us an email, give us a call. We'd love to help you out with that as well. So with that, we'll say thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.